Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just come back from Isle of Dogs.
By Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson, Isle of Dogs, not I Love Dogs.
Right.
Although one suspects that that's a little joke. It's stop motion, so you're going back to Fantastic Mr. Fox. Or, that style. Although I haven't seen that.
I have.
Was it good?
It was fantastic.
People loved it. No George Clooney in this one, though.
And that's not a bad thing, necessarily.
No, I'm just saying. It's set in Japan, in a sort of dystopian, kind of near-future type Japan. Not futuristic, but, sort of...
It's based on... I think a certain look must be based on Japanese crime movies, Yakuzas and...
Well, I think I read that Anderson said he was inspired particularly by Kurosawa.
Yes, well, because he must have been, because the villain... To me, looked a bit like Toshiro Mifune.
Right.
Though, I haven't read anything on the film, right?
Sure.
So I just can't be sure. But definitely, there's that resemblance.
The film starts off with a prologue, which tells you the story of how dogs came to be hated in this part of Japan, called Megasaki City.
Yes.
Megasaki City. Mayor Kobayashi has banished all the dogs because the dog flu has started to spread around, make all the dogs mangy and stuff, and it might spread to humans, and dogs are all sneezing and stuff. So they go, right, we're going to get all the dogs out of here, we're going to put them on this trash island. Like literally an island where they dump all their trash.
Yeah.
And we love cats.
I thought the story was that they just hated cats, and actually this whole thing about the flu was just a means of killing them off.
Yeah, well, there was like an ancient sort of war or something between dogs and cats, and cats were the victors and dogs were kind of driven out, and there was a suggestion throughout the film that the dog flu was created by people as an excuse to get rid of the dogs, or a way to get rid of the dogs.
Yes, because there was an overpopulation.
There's a bit of a conspiracy thing going on underneath it. Because the film starts off with this election between Mayor Kobayashi, who's the incumbent, and this scientist who claims that he's very close to a cure for the dog flu. But he's sort of dismissed and he doesn't win.
Yes.
So all the dogs are sent to this island. Probably 6 months down the line, I think. This boy flies his own plane over there. He's like 12 years old. He flies a little sort of almost handmade plane over time because he's looking for his dog. And this is the thrust of this film. He just wants to find his dog. He meets up with a load of abandoned dogs.
Yes.
And they sort of form a pack and go off and try and look for him. So you get the story on the island, and you also get the story back at home of the kid's gone missing. It turns out the kid is the nephew and ward of the mayor. And also this kind of bubbling conspiracy theory story of what's actually going on underneath it, and why didn't the scientist win the election, and why we hate dogs so much, and all this sort of thing.
I just think there's more art and, understanding of the human condition and adventure and laughs in this film, like in 2 minutes of this film than in all of the Spielberg film that we saw earlier today.
All of Ready Player One. Yeah. Pretty much. It's incredibly energetic and beautiful. The music is fantastic and gives the film such a feeling of place and tempo and movement. There are scenes which are just underscored by this dum 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 with kind of other music on the top, but this beat, it keeps everything moving and it makes things feel tense and involving, and sort of Japanese as well.
Yes. And graphically it's a masterpiece. The compositions, the style of art that's used, to convey the story, and the various ways in which it's done. It's really so imaginative, so sometimes there's split screen, and sometimes it looks like a comic book, the way of reading, and it uses Japanese art, the way that you read across the figure, right? Almost like a narrative. And, sometimes it uses, shadow screens, early animated films, yeah?
It uses silhouette, and it uses cell animation as well. It's quite interesting so the figures are these stop motion figures, so it's quote unquote real life, real photography. But then you see them being shown on television screens, and on the television screens they're cell animated versions of themselves.
Yes, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Yes.
It's just wonderful.
And it's so funny, so it has two key haikus, which I forget what they are, but it says something like, in the morning, the springs will flower, and then it says north, south, west. It's like, something
Just
that
to
doesn't
fill
make
in the
sense.
rest of the sentence.
Right? So the film is very self-aware, as is true of Wes Anderson, and also just very witty, and it has a generous spirit, right? So, kind of, you get a range of just interesting representations and characterizations, because obviously everyone wants to work with Wes Anderson. So he's got a whole who's who of people doing voices. It's Bryan Cranston.
Do you want me to tell you the cast?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the Americans, because I don't know the
Japanese.
The Japanese. It's we should say that the film is that the dogs are voiced in English, and the Japanese characters, the humans that is are Japanese. They're voiced in Japanese, and then given no subtitles. The film comes up with a title card at the start saying, the only time you'll understand the Japanese people are when someone interprets them.
Yeah, when a dog translates.
But a dog, on the other hand, all the barks have been translated into English.
Yes, exactly.
So the English-speaking cast are Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Bob Balaban, Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum, Greta Gerwig, Frances McDormand, Scarlett Johansson, Harvey Keitel, F. Murray Abraham, Yoko Ono's got a cameo, Tilda Swinton, Fisher Stevens, Lee Schreiber, Courtney B. Vance is the narrator, and Frank Wood.
It's an amazing
It's an unbelievable cast.
Yeah. And
all such recognisable voices. You feel them. They've got texture.
Yeah, and they're very well cast voices.
Yeah.
And the actors do wonderful things with them. And this thing about like actors flocking to work with Wes Anderson. Well, who wouldn't really? Because he gives them things to work with, and I think they do something like very beautiful. It's very, very funny. You do get like a sense of adventure, even the suspense bits, right? And it is stop animation, and the suspense bits were kind of suspenseful and witty. Yeah, like kind of the dogs going through the thing the metal.
Well, that was almost like a farce thing, really. That was like a Wallace and Gromit sort of.
Yes.
Goldblum machine thing.
Yes, but it becomes so. Like it starts off.
Oh, sure, yes.
While they make it,
yeah, sure.
and then it becomes funny.
Yeah, I love the way that things are filmed in depth as well. Like I think these films would look amazing if they were shot in 3D, which it would be easy to. Always is with stop motion, because you only have to move the camera a little bit and take another photo, or take another still. But the way that you get this main pack of 5 dogs. And the camera kind of swoops between them, and there's almost so much balance in the way Wes Anderson composes shots, whether it's that they're completely symmetrical, or that kind of things come in from the left and the right at kind of equal angles. But then he'll also have like one dog on the left hand side of the frame, right up close, and the other dog's sort of composed quite deliberately, but further back on the other side.
It's beautiful,
beautiful, arresting, interesting looking shots,
and also the light. Like the film creates a sense of dimensionality, because there are shots where the dog's hair glistens in the light, right, and you get this sense of depth and texture, and so unlike Spielberg's film This Afternoon, which seemed washed out, like the color seemed all washed out, really. This is kind of quite intense, but also quite purposeful. Right, that there's a color palette, right? So Mega City or whatever it's called is all like black and red, with splashes of red, and it looks beautiful. It looks stunning. Like every element of it kind of looks stunning. Actually, it was just a joy to see.
Do you think there's something uncomfortable in the idea that the English-speaking roles, the dogs, are the sort of the good guys? And the Japanese roles, the humans, are the baddies?
Not really.
Particularly considering that the one human who's white, the exchange student, is the kind of one who digs into the conspiracy and sort of helps save the day.
Yeah, she's the heroine. But the hero's Japanese, and it all takes place in Japanese culture, right? So, and you can imagine the film kind of... I think it's more of a dogs-humans thing, rather than a Western Japanese thing, because I imagine in Japan the dogs will be dubbed by Japanese actors, So no, that didn't bother me actually. Maybe it should. I mean, what I noticed more was actually that it's kind of like a real boys film, right? Like,
yes.
the show dog is a nutmeg. Is Scarlett Johansson playing, the Scarlett Johansson like sex symbol role and so on,
and love interest
and so on. And actually, the girl reporter, Western girl, just played by Greta Gerwig. I love the animation of it. I love the visualization of it. But actually, I didn't think Greta Gerwig voiced it very well. Really, that was my one little beef. And I think I have to be careful because why wasn't she voicing it well? And I thought, do you have something against Greta Gerwig? Which I don't, it's, but I'm just reminding myself that I wasn't as enthusiastic as some were about Lady Bird, but that was just because people were so...
people were really hyped it up.
Hyped it up so much, but I mean, I do love her. But I thought the other actors were much more skilled, at particularly Bryan Cranston, actually.
He was great.
At extracting almost like every nuance of meaning in it. And I just think it's ironic, that Wes Anderson's view of dogs and the interactions between dogs and, a dog's life and being a runt, or kind of being a stray, and how much more that communicates about what it is to be human and, and feelings and emotions than, the stupid Spielberg film that we saw.
Well, stop talking about Spielberg. We've done that.
Kind of, we saw it in the same day. It's an obvious point of reference.
But all you're doing is going on about how much you hated it.
Well, but I'm illuminating how wonderful this is in comparison.
I think Bryan Cranston's character he's really the centerpiece of the film, and he's the most interesting one because, with the exception of the mayor, who has a change of heart right at the end of the film, he's the only character who really changes and has something interesting in that respect. Because obviously he starts off as a stray. All the other animals there were once pets who've been exiled. So they know what it is to live in a nice house, and they know what it is. They talk about their favourite meals. Yes. And they've all had these great ones. And they've
all been loved, and he's never been loved.
And he's never really been loved, and his life is one of escape and scrounging around in bins. But then it turns out that he is the brother of the
family.
He's the brother of the dog that the boy's looking for. And underneath because he's a black dog at the start, and then he has a wash, and all of a sudden he's white with these little black spots. He's beautiful, and he doesn't recognize himself, and it kind of shakes him. And he learns to he plays fetch. So the kid throws a stick, and the dog's going, "I'm not going to go fetch the stick. I don't do fetch." And then he goes, "Okay, I'm only going to do it because I feel pity for you. I'm not doing it because I like it." He brings the stick back, he drops it, and then the kid nuzzles his face and strokes him. And you could just tell something's changing him. That's the only character for which that kind of thing happens. Yes. That makes him the most interesting one.
The dog welled up, and I felt you welling up next to me.
I didn't quite, but I liked it. I think Bryan Cranston, it plays it so brilliantly. His voice performance is pretty stunning, actually. The way you really feel his alienation and his kind of abandonment issues at the start, or his kind of loneliness. And his desire to be the leader of the pack, and you really feel it in his voice. You feel him softening and learning what love is, what it is to be loved, and that it's a kind of two-way street, and you can give some back. And I think that's great. I really, really love that.
Yes. I just loved it visually. Like, I just think it's a kind of masterpiece. It's kind of an example of how imaginative these animated films can be. I mean, there was that scene with the dog where it was like a flashback or a dream sequence, but there were all those bottles, right? And just the intensity of those greens and oranges, and then the dog itself was in shadow, like in a noir, right? And it was just so beautiful to see, right? It was almost like a different style of animation than what had gone on before. And actually, you could see that there are different styles of drawings are used very expressively at different points in the film, right? So you get, for example, the Japanese painting telling you the story of how, this conflict between the dogs and the cats came to be.
Right, that's your prologue story.
That's the prologue story, which is like a Japanese fable, but it's done, in the style of those Japanese scroll paintings, right? And then you have, the scenes that are set in the lab, and they're, really graphic and sharp and... Right, and then you have the scenes with the uncle, which have a real kind of, triumph of the will aspect to them, right? in terms of composition. It's just very beautiful.
Yeah, and very careful. And
Yes.
I think that's why I really appreciate. Like, you can tell the work. Sort of. There's no, I mean, Wes Anderson is the last person in the world who used shaky cam. And obviously shaky cam in a stop motion film as well is just not going to happen. You can
Yes.
put the camera down and shoot. But do you think there's a political or social statement in that about? I'm thinking particularly about the kind of the vilification of a certain type. So in this film, it's dogs, but in real life, it could be like
Immigrants. Of course, there's no
immigrants
question.
or benefit cheats, and their vilification and their use as a political tool to maintain power. We see at one
Yes.
point the mayor wins an election with 98.6% of the vote. He also poisons his enemy
Yes.
and kills him.
I think there's no doubt that there's meant to be a commentary on contemporary life, and on totalitarianism and on rigging elections and on using minorities as scapegoats. So I think that is all there, as background, really. I think the main thrust of the film is about inclusion and acceptance and love, and loyalty. Those are all kind of there. But the thing that amazes me about this film is that, it's done with such a light touch.
Yeah.
It's almost like irreverent, right? So, it'll tell you flashback starts and then flashback ends, right? And it's just kind of, very witty. It kind of, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it wants you to follow the story, and it allows you to do so, So I loved all of that. The fact that, it was kind of, slightly irreverent. I hesitate to say quirky, but...
Well, that's the word that's associated with Wes Anderson, isn't it? Quirky.
It is.
But I think it's kind of really associated with his imitators. Remember we talked about Paddington 2 a while back, because I was talking about, particularly in the second half of that film, how a lot of the composition and the kind of style of humour seemed very, very similar to Wes Anderson. Not copying him and not drawing him, but, just similar. And actually very successful in Paddington 2.
Yes.
But when I first started trying to watch Wes Anderson films, I had a really bad time with them. I watched The Royal Tenenbaums particularly. This was 10 or 15 years ago. And I had a really bad time with it. And it's only in recent times, so basically only the Grand Budapest Hotel and this that I've really, really enjoyed. Oh, I did like The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Yes.
I quite like that.
I quite like that.
But I think it's... I did find him affected and quirky in the worst way. Like kind of too knowing about his own style, sort of thing. But as I grow with him, or as I watch films that kind of imitate his style or take off from his style and don't do it as well, I kind of see that there's a bit of an X factor with him. Maybe like a Woody Allen or something. Like, he has his style, and he's the only one who does it that well.
I mean, I remember seeing it. I went to see it, the Royal Tenenbaums, with my colleague Victor Perkins when the film came out, and we talked about it afterwards, and kind of we were both very intrigued because, like, I wouldn't have, I couldn't say that I liked it, but I was fascinated by. I didn't know how to approach it. Yeah, it was one of those films that kind of that startled you in the sense you didn't know quite how to inhabit. It felt that it was like a really original voice, right? And that it was doing interesting things. And that, kind of some of them were funny. I wasn't sure that I was in tune with that sensibility. But you felt very much that it was like, kind of a new sensibility. It was something that you almost had no experience with how to connect with.
I think there's a kind of acquired taste aspect to it, which is not to say that it's bad, but you have to learn how to watch his films, I think, or learn how to inhabit them.
Maybe he's also learned how to communicate better because
that might be true.
Grand Budapest Hotel, didn't pose any of those problems to lots of people, whereas the Royal Tenenbaums, like, I liked it, but it was a bit kind of dislocating.
I think animation really suits him as well. It kind of helps you get some sort of distance. But having said that, the Grand Budapest Hotel was fantastic, and that was fantastic. All live action, and it felt really kind of cartoony.
Felt stylized, like Lubitsch.
And lively, yeah. Yeah, so maybe
rather
I
than
think maybe he
cartoon.
has just improved as a filmmaker as well. There's also that possibility.
Yeah,
you think,
you
think
know.
after 20 years you would.
You would. And also, to be honest, I'm talking about a memory of the Royal Tenenbaums when it came out in the 90s. So, for all I know, my experience of watching the film, again, would be a different experience. I'd react to it differently and I wouldn't have found it so strange.
I may have been a bit too young for it when I first tried to watch it.
Yes. So there are those things. Anyway, the point is that, this is fantastic. I hope people go see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really good fun. It maybe lulls a little bit. I wouldn't say like you could have such and such an amount of time cut out of it, but it does lull a little bit, I think, before it gets into the final third.
Well, I didn't feel that. I was completely with it until the ending, which I just thought, I liked the ending very much, but I thought it took too long with it. It explained too much, right? I kind of... Yeah.
Just how the dogs got back and everything settled down.
Yeah, like it took about maybe 5 minutes more than it should to just end. Like,
Perhaps.
I didn't feel that I needed to know about, the dogs and the puppies and the litter and the, It wants to show you what happened to everybody. Do you need to see the uncle in jail and the changes in the law and then, kind of the puppies and the owl and the, like...
Well, I just think, it's established what the world is like and how people are living, and so you just want to take those few seconds to just see everyone in their final position wrapped up, how the story ends.
Well, it's not a major... I liked it and I liked the ending and I love the film, but I'm just saying, if I'm trying to find fault with it, that would be...
Seems like you are.
Yes, well...
I know. It's just wrapped up nice and neat, isn't it? It's like you can imagine like a storybook, and then it, like, as the owl flies away at the end, it's sort of the book closes and it goes to the end, like the end of Shrek or something.
I think the film would have been just more poetic, better, had it found like an image or, just one scene to wrap everything perfectly. Because I don't think that we needed, and it's very rare for any story to actually kind of, clue you in as to what happened to every character, like in the story. That's just
well, no, I'm not sure that's true. When you have like a cast of all these characters that end up in going all these different directions, you very often get them sort of... Everyone gets their last moment just so you know where they are.
I don't agree. Often what in this case, you would have had some resolution to the dog and his master, right? But it's very rare for films to tell you what happened to like the uncle and the mayor and the that evil assistant that he had or whatever, and this dog and that dog and that dog and that dog and the owl. I just
don't think that's true. I think you noticed it in this, but I don't.
Okay, well,
I just don't think that's true. I think a lot of films do actually do that, particularly when they're skewed towards the younger sort of markets and they're more kind of family oriented and stuff, which this is. You do get those.
That may be. I really can't speak about these animated films because I'm less experienced in watching them.
If you think about the end of something like Paddington, for instance, like, okay, the family is a more contained unit in that, so it doesn't take as long to kind of wrap things up, but everyone does get their little moments at the end to finish off their parts in the story and tell you where they've ended up. It's not that uncommon, it's just that I think it lingered in this, so you noticed it more.
I'll have to think about that, but, my feeling right now is that it took too long in doing it. Really.
Otherwise, the story might feel, unfinished. You go, well, what happened to Sunday? Even though it's kind of obvious that things ended nicely, you might go, oh, well, but what happened to such and such a dog? Minor character, but I just think that's the way these stories end.
Well, perhaps you're right.
With a nice, neat little bow on everyone.
Well, but I just don't think that's true.
Anyway, we're really splitting hairs on that one.
We're splitting hair, and actually, I think we're losing emphasis because the fact is that the film is great.
It is.
And it's hugely enjoyable and very, very beautiful to look at. And we recommend that as many people as possible see it.
And witty with camera moves as well, I just wanted to pick up. And there's one point in particular. It's very early on when you're meeting the dogs on the island and the kids getting used to them and they're getting used to each other. And there are bits where all the dogs talk to each other and there's one-liner dialogue after another. And the camera kind of moves and reframes things. Wes Anderson always seems to find a new way to use the camera in his movies, despite the fact he's got a very recognisable style with the planometrics, symmetrical shots. He's always fun, sometimes he like in Grand Budapest Hotel, he started panning up and panning down, and which seemed to be something that he hadn't really done very much of before. And in this, there are these kind of very quick tracks in and tracks out that just slightly reframe things, and they're very funny. They're visually witty, and they just give you energy, and there's a lot of that in this, and I think it's great. And it goes well with the soundtrack as well. I can't emphasize enough. The soundtrack's by Alexandre Desplat, who did The Shape of Water.
Right.
Forgettable soundtrack. I think won the Oscar. But anyway, but in this, it's fantastic, and it integrates so well with the visual design and the cinema and the camera movement. It's fantastic. It's brilliant, and so good at the cinema. You know, fills your visual field, and it's beautiful. These great landscapes
and very, very textured images, like, you know. So I mean, it is a film to see at the cinema. The color has depth. The images have depth. You know, the compositions, which I think are very original. You know, kind of really envelop you. It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful.
And that's actually one of the reasons why I think it would be good in 3D, because I watched the Nightmare Before Christmas reissue in 3D. So it was shot in 2D back in whatever it was, 1994, and then it was rejigged into 3D for a cinema release like 20 years later. You really felt like these were stick figures on the table in front of you. Like, it felt so physical when they did it. And I think, you know, kind of model work, the stop motion like this, you know, a whole new kind of aspect to the film was there, which wasn't in the original, and you know, this would have looked good in 3D, I think. Which is actually kind of rare to tell. People are so down on 3D, and very often you feel like, oh, it's just there to make money. They haven't really thought about it. But in this, you know, you really feel, I think.
So I see that in the soundtrack there's the Rolling Stones and the Kinks and the Who, and the band. So there's and Van Morrison. So actually, there is quite a lot of like 1970s music to it, and I also see that there's quite a lot of Japanese music with particular strands of the Seven Samurai kind of used in the film. So that's interesting to find out. Donovan as well. Yeah, so that kind of quite a lot of that late 60s, early 70s singer-songwriter, slightly folky.
Yeah, there is when the dogs are walking. I also like the bit where the kid's on the slide.
Yes.
Just because he's 12 years old, let him go on a slide, man.
Yes.
And the dog gets really annoyed with him.
Yes, and I love the whole humor of that, and also the kind of the anger and the, you know, like you do get a sense of variegated and complex and multidimensional kind of people in a way that you don't get in the Steven Spielberg film. All right, shall we end it here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do go see it. It's really lovely.
Yes, you must. Great.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
We're on Twitter.
Yes.
We're at Eavesdrop Movies. We're on Facebook, Eavesdropping at the Movies. We've got a website, eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
And we're on iTunes.
We're at iTunes and SoundCloud is where you can hear the podcast, which you probably already knew because you're listening to it.
Right.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Good.